What's up? Welcome to the Primarch Purpose series. This is where I look at each individual Primarch going in reverse Legion order, giving you my thoughts and opinions on what I think the ultimate endgame goal for said Primarch might have been. We never get to see the ultimate endgame goal that the Emperor had in mind because of the Horus Heresy, and he definitely, I feel, had some type of goal in mind for each of these Primarchs because the investment in the Primarch project to create 20 Primarchs total, of which we know 18 of, being his most high resource, most laborious undertaking he's done in terms of like a gene project type of deal, and specifically altering and manipulating the base pure Primarch gene stock is not something you just do willy nilly in such an intensive project. So, definite feel of purpose was intended. So with that said, we're assuming some what if things that I go into more detail in the intro overview ramble on. Basically, the Great Crusade is over successfully. All the Primarchs are alive and well and loyal to an alive and well Emperor. The Imperial truth wins out. There's no ecclesiarchy. The Inquisition is not like we know it to be. And I just use that term because it's the easiest term to use. A traditional Inquisition doesn't exist in this what if kind of universe for this series. But we still have the threats of Xeno, still the threats of chaos, still the threats from within, still plenty of threats. It's not a peace and harmony galaxy for the Imperium. So, with that basic stuff in mind, let's look at the Primarch responsible for all the shenanigans known as the Horus Heresy, the Great Humbug. This is Lorgar, once called Lorgar Aurelian, and the Urizen, few names. He's worth kind of hyping up a little bit because he is the first Primarch to fall to the corruption of chaos. He is responsible for corrupting Horus. He is responsible for the entire Horus heresy. While Horus was the true mastermind of the heresy, for sure, you could say that Lorgar was kind of the background guy. And the ultimate end of it, he is the one responsible for the entire heresy happening. So, kind of a big deal, kind of the guy to point the finger at and blame. And this is because he had to worship something divine. He had to find the divine. He once thought the Emperor of Mankind the divine god to worship, and when that was ultimately cast aside by the Emperor, rejecting his attempts and telling him no, he found the Chaos Gods and began worshiping that. So how are we going to make this turn around and have them stay loyal while having the Imperial truth win out? Well, we're going to play a little bit with how Lorgar was handled. One of the big themes you find in the Horus Heresy, or prior to it, the Great Crusade, with the Primarchs, is the Emperor handles the Primarchs very differently. Some he truly treats like a son. Others he treats like almost like a mere weapon. It's very contradictory how he handles things. And with Lorgar, he basically more or less looked the other way, pretended not to truly notice most of his god worship attempts because the Great Crusade was happening. He needed Lorgar and his legion to take over planets. But when they started falling behind is when he really started getting annoyed by this. So instead, we're going to have him have a bit more of a overt role in Lorgar's kind of shaping as a Primarch. And what we're going to have is basically tutoring. Because Lorgar himself believes himself first and foremost to be a scholar. He's not a warrior like his brothers. He is the first to admit that. And we see this when he goes to meet Corax in battle during the Dropsite Massacre, which of course will never happen in this what if. But in that, we saw that Lorgar challenged him out of rage and fury for Corax's butchering the Galvar back. But he knew that he was no match for his brother. He was not a warrior. He was a scholar. So, with that said, the Emperor is going to notice this in the way Lorgar acts and does things and interacts. for this what if, and he's going to nurture that in a way. He's going to properly fertilize that crop and have it grow into something useful. So while Lorgar, let's say, was turning towards the divine, the Emperor is going to steer him towards the imperial truth, and that's ultimately what's going to happen here. Basically, in place of divine deity style worship that Lorgar seeks and then his legion seeks with him, they're going to have that understanding of the imperial truth. And the imperial truth is going to be that dogma that they are so steadfast and zealot like for in place of a god. So they are going to be ridiculously fanatical in their pursuing of the imperial truth. And that is how they're going to stay loyal to the emperor and to the imperium, because they're going to see the imperial truth for the for what it is, and understand that the idea of God worship, the dangers of it, and as a result, they're going to be not only devout practitioners, you could say, or devout followers of the imperial truth, and seeking to spread it amongst the stars, all zealous like, but they are also, thanks to Lorgar's tutelage from the emperor, going to have an understanding of what to look for, the seeds of heresy, you could say, and those being corrupted by the false idols that are known as chaos gods, the false warp entities, seeking to corrupt the galaxy from within and then bleed into it and obliterate it. And Lorgar won't stand for that. So he's still going to be the slower of the Primarchs and legions to conquer systems. Still going to have a lower number, but those lower numbers are going to be overlooked by the Emperor because of how steadfastly loyal and true to the imperial truth they are. They're basically kind of like anchor worlds that would be, if this was D&D or something, they'd be uncorruptible. They'd be like the paladin beacon worlds that no evil could ever taint, conceptually. And that, plus the fact that the word bearers are still the second largest legion. That's one of their things. They've always been the second, well, not always, but at the end of the crusade into the heresy, Ultramarines were the largest legion, and the word bearers were the second largest legion. So their numbers, their fanaticism to the imperial truth, their anchor worlds that they create, all with Lorgar at the head, were quite the feat. So what's the purpose now that the Great Crusade is over for Lorgar? Well, I think what we're going to see here is more of another Primarch to head up an Inquisition's type of branch. I think what we're looking at here is rooting out any god worshipping, whether it's trying to worship the Emperor as a god, whether it's trying to worship one of the false chaos gods. Either way, any deity worship is strictly forbidden, right, in the eyes of Lorgar in this what-if situation. So he is going to be zealously rooting that out. And basically, the ecclesiarchy, if anything, tried to there's going to be, of course, that branch of people that just can't take, the truth, kind of like what Lorgar and his legion was. So we have the ecclesiarchy being like this radical, dangerous faction. It wouldn't be called that necessarily, but for what we know in standard 40k, that would be a bad thing, a no-no thing, an evil thing. So anything like that would be rooted out by Lorgar and his legion, as well as Chaos Taint. Now, his legion would never have changed colors as a result, so they would have kept their granite gray armor, which is kind of fitting because in this situation, in this scenario, there are no Grey Knights. The Inquisition wasn't a thing standardly, and as a result, Grey Knights were never been founded because all this happened during the fires of heresy as like a Plan B thing. So I'm not saying the idea of what the Grey Knights are could never come to being in a potential scenario like this by the Emperor's decree. Remember, it's his own gene stock he uses gene seed for the Grey Knights. So that could always happen in the future, maybe. But as we know Grey Knights and what their purpose is, and as you know the Inquisition, what the Ordo Malleus is, and all the other branches, that doesn't exist. It never had to be created. So, of course, you could also argue, well, they would have been created anyway, but as we know them to be created was during the heresy, because of the heresy, that doesn't happen. So the word bearers, led by Lorgar, they're in their slate gray armor. They are going to root out chaos, corruption, as well as false god worshipping. Is a quite a nice stand-in for needing some gray armored warriors. So there you go. With that said, that's where I feel the purpose of Lorgar lies, is in rooting out that very thing that in standard 40k he propagated, right? I feel this kind of mirror image of what he was in, or what he is, I should say, in actual lore, is very GW-like. I feel if this was the thing that GW introduced and did, this is what they would do with the Word Bearers for sure. And it's very fitting, right? Knowledge is power, and we know what the Grey Knights themselves, just to look at them and kind of get a bearing on what Lorgar would and his legion would be like. The Grey Knights know a lot of dark, dangerous rituals to deal with demons, seal them away, banish them, weaken them, rebuke them, all that jazz, what to look for. Well, Lorgar is going to know that very thing as well as a scholar. The Book of Lorgar, instead of being a blasphemous, demonic ritual, conglomeration of evil deeds and heresy, the Book of Lorgar is going to be a shining example of imperial truth, and the true Book of Lorgar for his legion is going to be kind of what the Grey Knights had in their own book, for understanding what to do against chaos and rituals and the like against chaos. So theirs would be a very zealous undertaking. Lorgar would have fire in his belly and lightning in his eyes, and go forth and constantly scour the galaxy clean of any false idol worshipping and seeking out any threat of chaos corruption. Primarily, he would be active around the Eye of Terror area and other big warp storms that coalesce into being or what have you. And if should a warp storm kind of fizzle out to nothing, he and his legion would be the first to go and examine and purge and basically purge it. And it's another word I'm looking for that I can't remember, but they would scour it clean, if you will, of any chaos corruption, so the imperial truth can shine therein. And that's pretty much it, I think, for Lorgar's purpose. Very straightforward when you think about it, is take what he was and flip it, and that's what he would be. And I think it would be very fitting. Now, he wouldn't be the only Primarch understanding the roots of chaos a bit and how to fight it and deal with it, but he would be more the research end of it, if you will. He is a minor psyker, so he has some psychic capabilities which will be nurtured and developed for this purpose as well. We know he has some psychic capabilities, so he is by no means Magnus, right? But he definitely has that. And being one of the big scholarly Primarchs for sure, he would be more on the research side of it, devoting it, and be more primarily and chiefly going after just chaos corruption in general, and false idol worship, which could be chaos worship, could be trying to worship the Emperor or something else, worship some Xenos, whatever it is. If it's not the imperial truth, it's going to get purged. So that would be their focus. Anyways, that's my thoughts for Lorgar and his word bearers. They would become basically the Grey Knights, actually clad in gray instead of silver, if you think about it. And Lorgar would head up the anti-chaos side of things for the theoretical inquisition of this what-if universe. So, anyways, thanks very much for sticking through it. What are your thoughts on Lorgar? Do you think he would do this? Do you think it would be something completely different? Share it in the comment section below. Remember, he was the first heretic. He was the one responsible for all of this. He sought out and did research and devoted himself to the Chaos Gods. So I think it'd be very fitting for him to be the scholarly Primarch that the Emperor helped train up to be the anti-Chaos God Primarch. I think it's a nice, play on things. Anyways, thanks very much for sticking through it. Any question, comments, or requests, leave it in the comment section. Don't forget, you have until March to get your comments in on my post in the community tab for a potential Q&A ramble. Doesn't have to happen if there aren't any questions, but if there are questions, I will do one to answer them. So check that out. And until next time, take it easy.